The 1900s police reform movement, a turning point in history. The ideology of policing was influenced by the Texas Rangers in the 1800s and the slave patrols in the 1600s. The Texas Rangers was a group of citizens in Texas led by Stephen F. Austin that protected other citizens from the Indians during the absence of an army. Slave patrols watched over slaves and punished them for wrongdoing, just like the police do. The ideology of both of these groups is what the base of the first police department was founded on. Established in 1838, the Boston Police Department was the first of its kind and was created to help with the rising emergence of private business. This influenced cities to create departments of their own. The first official state police department was created in 1905 by Governor of Pennsylvania, Samuel W. Pennypacker, following the anthracite mine strike in 1902, which was used to argue why a state police force was needed. At first, the legislation wasn't widely accepted. Opponents of the measure feared that labor unions would be silenced by this new police force. Others feared that the police would be used as a private military and only protect the interests of the state. Yet advocates believed that this would provide order to areas of Pennsylvania that were riddled with high crime rates. The focal point on why people supported the police reform movement was that police brutality was being inflicted throughout the United States. The police would brutalize and detain peaceful protesters, even with no identifiable cause. People were horrified when a group of police officers beat and carried people away for peacefully advocating for tranquility. Often, these officers would target African Americans and use canines to intimidate or even attack them. Many historical analysts believe that this was because of the Jim Crow laws in the southern states, which separated colored and white Americans. Despite the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ended segregation and promoted equality for all, police brutality continued, so people organized what was called community alert patrols. These patrols would watch over communities and intervene in the case of police misconduct. They posted flyers in hopes of putting an end to police brutality in addition to helping those who were victimized. The 1912 Lawrence textile strike, known as the Bread and Roses strike, was a large example of police brutality. The strike occurred when workers demanded higher wages as the money received was not sufficient to support their families. Due to their demands not being met, they broke into mills and destroyed equipment, continuing on despite police intervention. Families often sent their children elsewhere when the parents protested. However, one day when mothers were dropping off their children to ride on a train to welfare, the police officers intervened and wouldn't allow them to board the train. The mothers resisted the authorities, leading to the police beating and arresting them as their children watched in pure horror. While the strike succeeded in regards to pay increases for the mill workers, it also showed the importance of police reform and the horrors that occur when police are unrestricted and unregulated. On May 2, 1963, thousands of black students missed school to march in downtown Birmingham, Alabama, to protest against segregation. Most of these students were arrested and hauled off to jail after they were met with the police. The following day, the crowd was much larger, and in response, police brutally attacked protesters, even though they were marching peacefully, which left the world speechless. These actions, along with many other civil rights events, led to the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. In 1965, stepbrothers Marquette and Ronald Fry were pulled over by a white police officer, and the situation became violent after Marquette failed a sobriety test. The two men began to attack the police officer, and soon after, bystanders began joining in on the fight, which led to more police arriving as backup. The scene lasted for at least an hour and was a horrifying sight for many. Following it, there were riots of those who were outraged with the actions the police took to stop the stepbrothers. These riots became violent, with people shoplifting, throwing bricks at police vehicles, and even setting buildings and cars on fire. This became a catastrophic event, ending in 34 deaths and roughly 1,000 injuries. The Watts riots are an example of an event the police did not commence, but prolonged by previous injustices against African Americans, thus furthering the reform movement. At Kent State University in 1970, shots were fired at students who were demonstrating their outrage at the Vietnam War. Although the majority of students were causing no harm, the Ohio National Guard opened fire into the crowd of students aimlessly, killing 4 and injuring 9. It was a needless act from the National Guard because these students were simply exercising their freedom to protest. The shooting showed how misconduct and disregard of people's well-being are extreme flaws in all policing systems, and in this case in the National Guard, which caused change to be acted upon within the reform movement. The case of Miranda v. Arizona is one of the most important cases involving police and reformation. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in favor of Miranda that individuals have a right against self-incrimination and that personal statements made in police custody could not be used as evidence if the accused has not been informed of their right to an attorney. This case acted on the change necessary in the police reform movement in the 1900s, which brought legislative change to shift how police treat citizens. The ruling can be seen today as arrested citizens are read their Miranda rights to protect themselves from self-incrimination. Before this police reform movement, a couple of amendments were added to the Constitution that were widely acted upon and essential to know when discussing this movement. The Fourth Amendment, passed in 1791, gives U.S. citizens the right against unreasonable searches and seizures and has been continuously modified since. The 14th Amendment, passed in 1868, is another crucial legislation because it involves equal protection for all. Often, people discuss this amendment when complaining about police discrimination or sometimes in lawsuits against the police departments for violating their rights. One piece of legislation that was extremely significant at the time of the reform movement was the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968. This law was created to increase equality when police are handling a situation and arresting individuals in hopes of reducing the number of police misconduct instances in the police force. Additionally, the 1983 Section Litigation Act benefited those who experienced police injustice. It allowed citizens to sue state government employees, such as police officers, for civil rights violations. These could include unwarranted force, improper arrest, violation of the Fourth Amendment, or racial profiling. This was a pivotal moment in the police reform movement because it finally gave officers a serious consequence for their wrongful actions. None of these legislative measures could have been passed without the work of organizations, such as the Black Panther Party and CAHOOTS, that put acts of police brutality into the light of American society. The Black Panther Party was a self-defense organization founded by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale in October of 1966. It was created to protect those who had been victims of any sort of police neglect.
We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people.
It promoted armed self-defense to all, so if there was an incident of police misconduct, they were instantly ready to protect themselves. The Black Panther Party not only provided protection, but it educated those in less fortunate neighborhoods. Members would often protest in large groups to advocate against police brutality across the San Francisco and Oakland Bay area in California. The Oakland Police Department would brutalize the primarily black population of Oakland and often encouraged police to arrest any African American male who looked suspicious, even if they were just walking down the street. There were thousands of stations just like this one in the 1900s, which is why the police reform movement had an enormous impact on U.S. history. Crisis assistance helping out on the streets, abbreviated to CAHOOTS, was an alternative to police action for those who distrusted police officers. They did not carry weapons, and the responders specialized in mental health for crises involving mental illness. People called the CAHOOTS hotline because they feared being mistreated by the police. In the 1900s, situations such as the Kent State shooting was a large reason people wished to change the system. Without the Miranda v. Arizona Supreme Court case or the Black Panther Party, Americans would continue to endure mistreatment and injustice. Effects of the police reform movement of the 1900s can be seen today throughout America. While police injustice and brutality still occur, the severity and frequency of these incidents have significantly decreased since the 1900s, thus proving the effectiveness of the police reform movement.